Hello world, Jay Sherm here. In today's episode, I'm going to give you the 3 reasons why you should embrace failure. Now, a lot of people might read the news every day about successful entrepreneurs or startups that raised $100 million or they were purchased by a bigger company for $1 billion. The news glamorizes, success. I mean, you see, like, for example, celebrities and musicians and book authors, people in the entertainment industry that succeeded. They got the deal. They got the big payday. They are famous or whatever, wealthy, but you don't see the other, 50 million people trying to do what they're doing and failing at it, broke, hungry, without a place to stay, living out of their car. I recently heard a story I didn't realize about Tiffany Haddish was living out of her car as a comedian, trying to make her way into the acting world and the comedic world. And finally she made it, but she struggled for, at least half of her life until she finally got to the point where she succeeded. So she learned from her failures. She didn't give up. She didn't, act negative, which is the first reason you should embrace it, is negativity. I mean, nobody likes a negative Nancy or a Debbie Downer. And you have to push away the negativity that is associated with a failure. So let's say you opened a brick and mortar store, you're a fashion designer, you wanted to have your own clothing line, and you opened the store. You spent all your savings, you created this line of clothing, maybe you purchased clothing from other places and you filled up your store. But you didn't get a lot of business. The pandemic came and your store suffered. You probably lost money. You probably had to close your store down. But here's the thing. You might have failed in that moment, right? Your store might have closed down. You might have lost money, but you're still alive. You're still able to work, maybe get a job temporarily till you figure out what's next. And you should write down a list of things you learned from the experience. Maybe opening a store was a bad idea. Maybe you should have instead started an Etsy store online, which is basically free. There's no overhead. There's no brick and mortar, inventory and rent and utilities and, business license and tax and all that kind of stuff, insurance. So maybe you don't need a store. Maybe you learned that you can sell the same amount, if not more, clothing through your Etsy portal. So you need to stay positive instead of negative. What's the opposite? Positive, right? You need to think about the fact that, well, I opened a store. I was able to sell some clothing. I was able to show people that I have it in me to be an entrepreneur. You have to focus on the things that you learned. So take the experience, right? Maybe opening a store was a bad idea, but what would be a good idea? Now, put your positive energy into that. If it's an Etsy store or selling your clothing line on your website or maybe another consignment shop somewhere else, focus on that to get the money back that you lost and then thrive. You can do it if you focus on the positives. If you think on the negative, if you're constantly thinking about the negative aspects of your failures, you're never going to get out of that deep, dark hole of depression. So focus on the positives. Every single day, try to do better than you did the day before, right? And that's part of what number 2 is learning from your mistakes, right? Learning is important because I'm going to tell you a secret. You very rarely learn anything from a success, okay? And it's funny, I didn't even realize this until I recently was talking to somebody who was asking me about the last documentary I just finished. It was my 3rd movie, okay? The first movie I made, which was 11 years ago, I learned so much and I made a lot of mistakes, like a lot of mistakes. But I made this movie, right? And it worked out and it was successful. It still is. Then my second movie I made 5 years ago. And I applied all the mistakes from that toward that movie. And it was it was such a better experience for me. It was a positive experience. Because of all the things that I avoided, I did so much better in this second movie. And it was easier for me to make. I enjoyed doing it much more. I didn't fall into a lot of the pitfalls. But I still made some mistakes, right? I still learned from the experience, right? So I took what I learned from that one. And you guessed it, I applied it to my 3rd movie, which I just finished about a month ago. And, I feel as though this last movie I just made, I made very few mistakes, if any at all. I mean, I made a couple of mistakes here, but the fact of the matter is I learned from the first two movies, and I got so much better at making a movie that now this third movie was just so much better. The experience was just the best I could possibly. And I can't even imagine when I make my fourth movie, the amount of skill and knowledge that I'm going to be applying to that movie. From there, it's just going to be like a boilerplate kind of blueprint that I've created of how to create a movie. And so you got to apply that kind of mentality. So if you built a tech app or a website or some kind of gadget and it didn't do well, right? You built it, didn't do well, you didn't sell any, and you couldn't get any users, right? But you learned how to build the app. You learned how to do a 3D printed gadget. You learned how to talk to people and get feedback. You learned something, right? What did you do wrong? What mistakes did you make? Take those failures, right, and apply them to your next one. Avoid that stuff, and your experience will be so much better. Instead of being afraid to do something because you failed, which is the third tip, or the third reason really is, don't be afraid, man. You're going to have this risk aversion in your mind where you're going to be like, well, I can't take another risk because I failed and I lost money and I lost time. I can't possibly risk another year of my life on another idea or a couple $1,000s or whatever it is on another idea. I can't do it. I can't take the risk. That's where you're wrong. You can take the risk, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on a possible opportunity that will change your life forever, all because you made a mistake. I hear people that have gone through 1 or 2 divorces and they still are getting married to a third person. I mean, they weren't afraid to get married for a third time because they made mistakes the first two. Maybe that third time was the one. Maybe that was their soulmate. Maybe that was the love of their life. And the first two, they learned a lot from the relationships, and they knew how to apply better communication, better relationship goals, etc., to the third spouse, and maybe that succeeded. I don't know. Same goes for, building websites and building apps and building gadgets and maybe opening up a store. Everybody and every business and every idea learns from the previous idea and the mistakes that were made. I mean, I've said this before in many episodes of my podcast. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times at creating a light bulb, right? And he succeeded the one time. And so he learned from those 10,000 failures until finally he created the perfect light bulb. So you have to keep trying and trying and trying and getting better skills while you're doing it. Learning from your mistakes. Jot down a list of mistakes you made. When you do your next business, make sure you stick to that list. Say, I'm not doing these 10 things. And if anybody who you work with tells you otherwise, you say, listen, I've already been through this. I've made my mistakes. I'm not doing it again. You don't want to follow my rules and follow my lead? Then I don't want to work with you. You're better off without them. You're better off on your own, following the path that you feel as though is the correct path. And look, in the end, it comes down to the fact that nobody's going to succeed overnight, right? This entrepreneurship lifestyle, it takes a long time to get to a certain level of success. And success doesn't always mean financial success. It doesn't mean you're going to be rich and living on a yacht, but it might mean that you have freedom and you have some extra time for your friends and family or time for your hobbies because, you are creating something new and you have extra time on your hands and you're able to do what you want, create your own schedule. Maybe that's what success means. So you have to stay positive, learn from your mistakes, and take those risks to achieve that goal. Because you're not going to achieve it by, being scared and being negative and not taking risks. I'm just telling you, it's not going to happen. And ask any entrepreneur out there what they did to succeed, and they'll probably tell you those were the top 3 things they did, right? Don't live in fear and stay positive. If you have any more ideas as to how you can learn from your failures, your mistakes, as always, I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts and your feedback. leave them in the comments and I will respond to everybody like I always do. Hopefully these 3 reasons to learn from your mistakes is helpful. I know it's been helping me out for years, and I stick to it and I do it every single day. No matter how difficult the days are and how difficult the work is, you got to keep your head up. You got to stay forward, move forward, and you got to just push through those obstacles. And as always, I will see you all in next week's episode.